A black woman walked into a luxury car showroom bearing her own name. But the staff inside had no idea who she was. And somehow, in the way they looked at her, in the way they spoke to her, they made her feel like she didn't belong. Imagine owning an entire company, only to be dismissed by your own employees just because you didn't look like someone with money. Naomi Caldwell wasn't just any customer. She was the founder and CEO of Caldwell Motors, the first black woman to ever build a luxury automotive brand from the ground up in the United States. She didn't walk in to be admired. She walked in to be treated like everyone else. But instead of respect, Naomi was met with careful smiles, polite deflections, and a chilling kind of silence, the kind that whispers, "You're not supposed to be here." It wasn't the rejection that hurt. It was what hid behind it, a quiet prejudice masked in customer service language. And worst of all, it came from the very place she had built with her own 2 hands. But Naomi didn't shout. She didn't flash her title. She didn't storm out. She took one quiet step back, to observe, to listen, to prepare. Because what she saw that day would spark a fight to change not just her company, but the entire industry. Have you ever been judged just by the way you look, denied an opportunity, even though you were more than qualified, or stayed silent because speaking up might cost you your job, your seat, your future? This is the story of a CEO who went undercover in her own company, a young employee who chose to stand up when it was safer to stay quiet, and how one small act of courage shattered an entire system built on silent discrimination. And you won't believe what happened when she came back as her true self. They didn't turn her away because she couldn't afford the car. They turned her away because they couldn't imagine that someone like her could be the owner. Don't look away, because this isn't just a story about bias. It's about a bold reckoning inside the walls of a luxury empire. Naomi Caldwell wasn't born into wealth. She grew up on the south side of Chicago, where people didn't dream of luxury cars. They just prayed their old ones would make it to work. In her neighborhood, you didn't aspire to elegance. You hustled to survive. You worked twice as hard just to be called qualified. And you learned early on that the world wouldn't hand you a seat. You had to build your own table. But Naomi always believed true class doesn't come from where you were born. It comes from how you treat people. After earning her degree in mechanical engineering, then completing an MBA at Columbia, Naomi started small in a dusty garage with just 3 employees and one unwavering belief: luxury cars shouldn't be reserved for the elite. They should be for anyone with the means and the passion to drive one. She founded Caldwell Motors, the first black-owned American luxury car brand ever showcased at the Geneva Motor Show. From New York to Dubai, her logo came to represent quality, innovation, and a dream built without privilege. Naomi never forgot the journey that got her there. On her desk, 53 floors above the city, she still kept a photo from the day she opened her first factory frizzy hair tied back, oil-stained shirt, and a tired smile full of pride. Even now, she personally reads every customer email, even the complaints, because to Naomi, every story is a chance to understand more deeply the people she serves. Until one day, a letter made her stop, not because it raised technical concerns, but because it touched something far deeper, a betrayal of trust. It came from a black customer named David Williams. He had walked into Caldwell's Beverly Hills showroom ready to pay in full, in cash. But instead of being welcomed, he was met with suspicion, with cold politeness and eyes that said, "You don't belong here." Naomi read every line, her hand tightening around the paper. It wasn't just pain she felt, it was responsibility. Because if it happened to David, it had already happened and would keep happening to hundreds of others. Inside a system she once believed was fair. She picked up the phone. "Daniel, book me a flight to Los Angeles. Don't use the company account. No press, no emails. This is personal. This wasn't a business trip. It was a return to the truth." The next morning, Naomi arrived at JFK Airport wearing something shockingly simple. A white button-down shirt, dark jeans, plain white sneakers, no designer logos, no luxury handbag, no Rolex, no private driver, just her and a determined glint in her eye. On the flight to Los Angeles, Naomi stared out the window, watching New York fade beneath a blanket of white clouds. She thought back to her early days when no one called her Madam CEO, when she hand-washed every prototype car before her first investor pitch. And now, even with her name known around the world, she was about to walk into a place where no one would care who she was. The rental SUV rolled through the heart of Beverly Hills. Towering palm trees lined the streets, and sunlight bounced off designer storefronts like glassy mirrors. Then she saw it. Caldwell Motors, her flagship showroom, the crown jewel of her empire on the West Coast. Naomi stepped out. She straightened her collar. No VIP badge, no assistant at her side, no applause or champagne welcome. Just a woman returning to see her company through a stranger's eyes. She was just another unfamiliar black woman, walking into a world built on polish and perception. The heavy glass doors swung open. The crisp scent of Italian leather and espresso drifted through chilled air. Inside, the showroom gleamed like a modern art museum. Luxury cars worth millions sat on polished floors, untouchable, pristine, intimidating. Naomi walked in slowly, every step deliberate. Her eyes scanned the room, quietly observing. Not a single staff member looked her way. Not a smile, not a nod, except a brief, sideways glance from the receptionist behind a glossy white desk. A glance that flickered from polite to probing. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I help you?" The voice was courteous, but the eyes had already done a full-body scan. Head to toe, assessing, weighing. Naomi smiled. "I'd like to see the Bugatti Chiron Supersport. I heard this showroom has one on display." A beat, just one, but enough. The receptionist blinked just slightly. Then, the smallest twitch in her brow. The quickest glance at Naomi's sneakers, the white shirt, the lack of brand names, the absence of status. "Let me check with someone from sales," she said. Turning to her headset without another word, Naomi knew she had just passed through her first unspoken test and failed, not because of her credit score, not because of her qualifications, but because of her skin tone, her natural curls, and a pair of brandless sneakers. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a man approaching, salt and pepper hair slicked back, a custom-tailored navy suit that practically whispered authority. His eyes were sharp, his smile measured. Richard Langford, the showroom manager. She'd heard about him before. Knows his clientele, they said. Selective, discerning, strategic. "Miss, do you have an appointment?" he asked, his tone smooth but clipped. Naomi answered gently, "I didn't think you needed an appointment to see a display model." Richard offered a smile, the kind reserved for people who don't quite belong. With something like the Chiron, we usually operate by private viewing only. It's currently being held for a VIP client. Naomi held his gaze. Steady, calm, unflinching. "Really? And who's the client?" A pause, just long enough to feel the edge. "I'm afraid that's confidential," Richard replied, his smile frozen. Naomi said nothing. She turned her head slightly, glancing toward the showroom glass. And there it was. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport, gleaming under the lights like a crown jewel. Still on the floor, still untouched, still available. Just not for people like her. No velvet ropes, no reserved signs, no protective coverings. Just the car and a layer of polished performance hiding something far more rotten underneath. And in that moment, Naomi understood she wasn't standing in a luxury car showroom. She was standing at the gates of a filter system where class was defined not by merit, but by skin tone and surface appearance. She remained still beside the glass enclosure, where the Bugatti Chiron Supersport sat like some sacred relic. No anger, no confrontation. Naomi simply nodded, then quietly stepped back toward the waiting area, slipping into the role they had silently assigned her, not the right kind of customer. From her seat, she watched. Just minutes later, an older white couple walked in. Nothing flashy. He wore a simple polo. She carried a canvas tote and wore a light floral dress. But no one asked if they had an appointment. No hesitation, no private viewing policy. Instead, a sales associate practically rushed to greet them. "Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, what an honor to have you here." And then the pageantry began. Champagne flutes appeared. Luxury brochures, thick with gold embossing, were handed over with both palms. Naomi watched it all unfold, not with envy, but with clarity. Because this wasn't about cars, it was about codes. Unspoken rules that sorted people by who looked like they belonged and who didn't. And just like that, the couple was ushered, without hesitation, straight to the Bugatti Naomi had just been denied. She turned her eyes to Richard. He was watching too, but not the car. He was watching her. His expression was calm, but the message behind it was unmistakable. This place is for them, not for you. Naomi said nothing. She just watched. Every interaction unfolding in front of her like an open book, one she had helped write, but never realized had such ugly footnotes. A young white man in a hoodie strolled in. He was greeted with enthusiasm and ease. Moments later, a sharply dressed black man in a tailored suit walked through the door, polite, confident, clearly successful. and yet he was gently guided toward the lower-end models, subtly redirected, steered away from aspiration. There was no sign on the wall saying you had to be white or famous, or wear a Patek Philippe to be treated like a VIP. But the gestures, the glances, the oh-so-polite rejections, they screamed it loud and clear. Naomi checked her watch. She'd been sitting there nearly an hour. No one followed up. No one offered her water. No one asked if she had questions. Not a single staff member invited her to explore, even though the showroom was nearly empty. And then something happened that made her sit up. An older black gentleman stepped through the doors. Salt and pepper hair, well-fitted suit, eyes bright with intention. "I'd like to take a look at the new Bentley line," he said with quiet confidence. A female associate leaned toward Richard, whispering something under her breath. Moments later, the man was gently redirected, escorted toward a lower-tier model with a rehearsed smile and a line delivered like a favor. "This range might be more practical, more aligned with your budget and day-to-day needs." Naomi didn't need a spreadsheet, didn't need a board meeting, didn't need a single data point more. She was standing inside the evidence, a system designed not to serve, but to filter. Not by income, but by assumption. A luxury gate veiled in glass, transparent, elegant, and laced with quiet discrimination. She stood up, and without a word, walked out. Not because she was defeated, but because she had seen enough. The late California sun cast a warm glow on her face as she stepped outside. There was no rage in her expression, only clarity, stillness, and a quiet, burning resolve. If they've built a system of exclusion inside the brand I created, then I'll be the one to dismantle it. From the inside. Naomi sat alone in a quiet corner of the cafe across the street. Her black coffee had long gone cold, but she hadn't touched it. She couldn't take her eyes off the giant glass window across the road, the window that looked directly into her own showroom. From here, she could see everything: who walked in, who was welcomed, and who was ignored. Her showroom, once a symbol of fairness and aspiration, now looked like a stage. And the roles being played inside were anything but random. She didn't take notes on paper. She didn't need to. She wrote it all down in memory. The white man in cargo shorts offered sparkling water. The Asian woman advised to consider a more practical model. The brown-skinned teenager told to leave a number and come back after proving financial stability. She didn't need security cameras. She didn't need microphones. All she had to do was watch long enough. And then something caught her attention. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, stood near the front desk. Red-brown hair tied back neatly, cream-colored blazer. Her posture wasn't overly confident, but there was something different about her eyes. Not jaded, not indifferent, just quietly alert. Naomi recognized her. She was the first employee Naomi spoke to earlier, the one who had greeted her, only to be replaced by Richard almost immediately. And now she was watching, too. Her name was Maria Torres, and in the way Maria moved, in the way she glanced at her manager, then quickly looked away, there was something fractured, a hesitation, a quiet split, as if her mind was caught between two worlds, what she saw and what she was told to ignore. Naomi straightened in her seat as another customer walked into the showroom. A middle-aged black woman, neatly dressed. Warm smile, posture confident but kind. She walked directly to Maria, pointed toward a display car, and asked something. Maria nodded, started to step forward, and then Richard appeared. No shouting, no commands, just a slight tilt of the head. A look, sharp, subtle, final. Maria stopped mid-step, pivoted, and walked away, leaving the woman standing alone in the center of Naomi's own showroom as if she didn't exist. There was no apology. No, someone will be right with you. No, let me check. After a few seconds of silence, the woman turned around quietly and walked out. No one stopped her. No one even looked up. Naomi leaned forward, her eyes fixed like steel behind the cafe glass. She didn't blame Maria, not after what she'd just seen, because what Naomi had witnessed was a silent war. A young woman, caught in the pull between compliance and conscience. Maria wasn't complicit. Maria was struggling. Naomi gently slid a $20 bill beneath her untouched coffee cup. Then she stood. She slung her bag over her shoulder and stepped back into the sunlight, crossing the street once more to the showroom she had built. But this time, she wasn't there to test drive anything. She came to plant a seed. Naomi walked straight up to Maria, her gaze calm, but razor sharp beneath the kindness. Hi, I wanted to ask about a car model, but not right now. I just wanted to know your name. Maria hesitated. Her fingers gripped the edge of her tablet. I'm Maria. Naomi smiled, gently, as if she'd known that answer all along. And then, like it had all been planned, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, white card. She placed it softly on the counter, right in Maria's line of sight. If there ever comes a day when you feel like talking to someone, call me. No pressure, no explanations. Naomi turned and walked out of the showroom. But she knew the seed had been planted, and if Maria found the courage, she could become the first person to help Naomi expose a system that had hidden behind glass and luxury for far too long. The card sat silently on the counter. No gold trim, no corporate seal. Just 3 lines, Naomi Caldwell. A phone number, no title, no logo, no display of power. Just an open door and a quiet invitation to rise. Maria Torres sat motionless behind the wheel. Her car was parked in the far corner of the employee lot behind the showroom. The engine was off, the headlights were off, but inside her mind everything was louder than ever. She had been holding that card for over 30 minutes, gripping it, setting it down, picking it back up again. Every time her eyes landed on the name Naomi Caldwell, her heart pounded harder. She knew that name. Everyone who worked at Caldwell Motors did. The founder, the CEO, the woman who had become a symbol. But this morning, Maria hadn't seen a symbol. She had seen a woman ignored, a customer sized up by her clothes, a human being denied quietly and legally. And Maria couldn't shake the moment when she was called back, when Richard gave her that subtle head tilt and she obeyed. What had she done? She had turned away. Maria pressed her hand to her forehead. her heart growing heavier with each breath. 2 years. 2 years working here. Telling herself, I'm just following protocol. It's not my call. If I push back, I could lose everything. But today, for the first time in her life, Maria hated her own silence. Not because Naomi was her boss, but because Naomi had proven something terrifying. Even the woman who built the system could still be devoured by it. Maria glanced at her phone. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the numbers on the card. She hesitated, then pressed call. 1 ring, 2 rings. A warm voice came through the speaker. This is Naomi. Maria gripped the steering wheel. It's me, Maria, from the showroom. There was a pause. Then Naomi's voice softened instantly. I'm really glad you called. Maria bit her lip. I don't even know why I'm doing this. I'm not sure I should. But Naomi didn't interrupt. She just waited. Maria swallowed hard. Is there somewhere quiet we can talk? Somewhere. No one can see us, Naomi replied gently. Do you know the little cafe on West 3rd behind the old bookstore? I do, Maria said, nodding instinctively, as if Naomi could see her. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up. Her heart still pounded. Her hands still trembled. But one thing was clearer than ever tonight. For the first time, she wasn't going to turn away. The cafe sat tucked behind an old bookstore, a warm pocket of silence in a world that never seemed to stop shouting. Faint yellow light spilled across exposed brick walls. It was the kind of place people came to disappear, not to be seen. Naomi chose the back corner table, near a window that opened to a narrow alleyway, out of sight, out of reach. A cup of hot tea sat on the table. She slowly stirred it with a spoon, but her eyes never left the entrance. Then Maria stepped in. Thin frame, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes scanning the room as if measuring the risk of every step. She carried nothing but a small crossbody bag and a heavy fear that clung to her like shadow. Naomi gave a quiet nod. Maria saw her and let out a breath that sounded like a weight finally falling from her chest. She walked over slowly, her hand still gripping the strap of her bag. I didn't think you'd come, Naomi said. Her tone neither expectant nor disappointed, just honest. Maria pulled out the chair, lowered herself down with care. Neither did I. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, not urgent. And for a moment, no one needed to speak. But then it was Maria who broke it. You don't understand, Maria whispered, her voice rough. This isn't just about a few rude employees. It's deeper than that. She looked down at her hands, clenched gently on the table. We were trained not with manuals, not with documents, but with looks, with signals, with silence. She swallowed hard. They told us not to waste time on non-serious buyers. Maria looked up. Her eyes were beginning to redden. Do you know what non-serious really means? Naomi didn't answer. She waited, letting Maria say it for herself. It means brown skin, black skin, an unfamiliar accent. It means a man without a watch, a woman in a cotton dress instead of silk. Maria gave a bitter laugh. They call it efficient time management. Naomi tilted her head. Her voice dropped lower, quiet, but steady. Who else knows about this? Besides Richard, Maria hesitated. Others? But no one says anything. Everyone's scared. People have rent to pay. They need to keep their jobs. She paused. Her voice shook slightly. So did I. I stayed silent for 2 years because I thought silence was safer. Naomi leaned in, her tone soft but clear. Then, what changed? What brought you here tonight? Maria stared at her for a long time. Then she said, "Because today, I saw a woman get dismissed, not because she was poor, but because they thought she wasn't refined enough. They didn't know who you were. And the worst part, they didn't care. And I'm no different from them." Maria said, her voice low, "When I stood still and turned away." Naomi shook her head gently. "You didn't turn away tonight. You're here. That's where it starts." Maria exhaled long, shaky. "What do you want from me?" "Naomi." Naomi leaned back slightly, not pushing, just steady. "Not now. But if I decide to bring this to light, I'll need someone on the inside to confirm it. No cameras, no names, just the truth." Maria said nothing. One hand rested on the rim of her glass, the other covering part of her face. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." Naomi smiled softly, patient, steady, safe. Brave doesn't mean fearless. It means doing it, even when you're shaking. Maria didn't respond, but she didn't get up either. And to Naomi, that silence was the answer. That night, Naomi sat in her hotel room, the lights of Los Angeles glittering through the high-rise windows like scattered stars. On the table, an old leather-bound notebook and her phone, replaying every word Maria had said hours earlier. There was no more doubt. This wasn't about a few tone-deaf employees. It was a refined system, a hidden process, repeated with the precision of a toxic algorithm. Naomi picked up her phone. One tap. "Daniel, I need you." 15 minutes later, Daniel Harper, her trusted assistant and behind-the-scenes strategist, was on the line. "What do we have so far?" he asked. Naomi's voice was firm. "Testimony, observations, but nothing undeniable. Not yet." "Then what do you need? Proof? Video?" A side-by-side test that no one can explain away. Daniel didn't hesitate. "I have someone." The next morning, a man walked into Caldwell Motors, salt and pepper hair, impeccably tailored navy suit, a Swiss watch gleaming on his wrist. Michael Reeves, a financial advisor, old friend of Daniel's, and most importantly, white, wealthy, and completely unknown to the showroom staff. Across the street, Naomi stood just behind the tinted window of a parked car, one earbud in, phone connected to a hidden camera sewn into Michael's lapel. She didn't blink. Not this time. She was done watching as an outsider. This time, she was ready to expose everything. Within 30 seconds of stepping inside, Michael was greeted warmly by a young associate. "Good afternoon, sir." "What model would you like to see today? The Bugatti Chiron Supersport." Michael replied, his tone cool, confident, every bit the high-end buyer. Moments later, Richard Langford appeared in person. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Richard, the showroom manager. What an honor to have you with us today." He shook Michael's hand, the kind of handshake Naomi never received. "We're pleased to let you know the Chiron is available for private viewing today. Please allow me to show you personally from behind the tinted window across the street." Naomi watched silently, her hand clenched into a fist, because just yesterday she had stood in that exact same spot, had asked for that exact same car, and was turned away with a cold, polite smile. In her earpiece, Daniel's voice came through softly. "We've got everything. Video, audio, body language. They won't be able to deny a thing." Naomi closed her eyes, took a slow, deep breath. She didn't feel victorious. She felt heavy to prove something so obvious. Naomi had to stage a play one where she had already lived the pain as the original, unwitting lead. But she also knew truth on its own is not always enough, not unless it comes with evidence. When Michael stepped out of the showroom and gave a subtle nod, Naomi said just one sentence, soft, steady, game on. Night fell over Los Angeles in a haze of neon lights and luxury billboards. Inside her high-rise hotel room, Naomi no longer stared at the city skyline. Her eyes were locked on her laptop screen, frozen on the frame where Richard Langford shook hands with Michael Reeves, his face lit with the warmth of spring sunshine. She clicked back, watched herself just the day before being turned away, asked if she had an appointment, treated like someone unqualified to even be there. Then she skipped forward. Richard, personally welcoming Michael, inviting him to see the very same car right this way. Naomi sighed, not in anger, but in exhaustion. Because sometimes, when you're a woman of color, you have to bring video footage to prove what others only need words to be believed. She opened her email. Recipient Jonathan Fields, longtime board member of Caldwell Motors. Subject line, urgent, customer discrimination at Beverly Hills. Showroom. The body of the message was brief, direct, undeniable. Jonathan, I think you'll want to see the attached video. It documents how two customers with similar financial profiles were treated in completely different ways at our flagship Beverly Hills showroom. One was turned away for not having an appointment. The other was treated like royalty despite being a total stranger to the staff. If this leaks to the press, it won't just be a slap to our brand. It will be a full-blown crisis, and we won't be able to say we didn't know. I expect your response before this story leaves our hands. Naomi Caldwell. She hit send, and in that single moment, everything changed. The next morning, 7:43 a.m., Richard Langford sipped his morning coffee in his office, skimming the latest sales reports when his phone rang. The caller ID lit up Caldwell Motors headquarters, board office. He picked up. The voice on the other end was cold, steel wrapped in protocol. Richard, we need to talk. Richard raised an eyebrow. About what? No hesitation, no pleasantries. We've just received a video. You'll want to prepare your explanation for this afternoon's emergency meeting. Richard slowly set his coffee down, his posture straightened, his voice hardened. What video? A pause, then just 4 words. You know which one. Click. The line went dead. Richard stood, walked to the window. Outside, the showroom hummed as usual, customers arriving, employees smiling in tailored suits and branded ties. But he could feel it. The ground beneath him was shifting. Meanwhile, in New York, inside the boardroom at Caldwell Motors headquarters, Jonathan Fields sat in silence, watching the video for the 3rd time. Beside him, Claire Danvers, head of communications. Neither spoke. The light from the laptop screen lit their faces serious, unblinking, cold as glass. She has proof, Claire said at last. And if she goes public, this won't be about one showroom. It'll put the entire company under scrutiny. Jonathan nodded slowly. Then it's time. We decide which side we're on. That afternoon, the air inside Caldwell Motors, Beverly Hills, felt thick, like a storm was gathering. Even though the sun outside was blazing, something inside had shifted. Every employee felt it. A silence heavier than usual. Movements a little more careful. Richard Langford walked out of his office, no smile on his face, no greetings, no casual check-ins about sales numbers, just one sentence, spoken low, but with the kind of gravity that made hearts skip. All department heads. Emergency meeting. Now. 15 minutes later. Every seat in the glass-walled conference room was filled. Managers, leads, senior associates. Richard stood at the front, arms folded, posture rigid as a flagpole. Someone in this room has betrayed this company. Eyes darted, a throat cleared, fingers tapped nervously on a knee. No one said a word. We've just been reprimanded directly by the board, Richard continued, his tone sharp, his jaw set, because of a video, filmed right here, showing how we do business. He paused. Let the weight of his words settle into the room. Apparently, someone in this building believes they're on the side of justice, that they're doing the so-called right thing. Let me be clear, the only right thing is protecting this company. A department head dared to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Do we know who sent the video? Richard shot him a look, the kind of look that made people lower their heads before being told to. No, but I have instincts, and I will find out. After the meeting. Richard marched straight to the front reception area, where Maria Torres was quietly entering data behind the desk. Maria. She jumped slightly, turned around, trying to steady her breath. In my office. Now. Inside, the door shut behind her with a sharp click, loud and final, like a verdict. Richard remained calm, too calm, and that made it worse. Do you know anything about that video? His voice was level, but it carried danger like a blade just beneath velvet. Maria tried to keep her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Richard stepped closer, now just an arm's length away. Are you sure? Because I've noticed you tend to ask more questions than most. You give looks the kind that mean you're thinking things you shouldn't. And lately, You've been distracted." Maria swallowed hard. "I'm just doing my job." Richard gave a tight-lipped smile. "You know, Maria, loyal people, they stay. But the ones who play both sides, they always think they're safe until suddenly they have nowhere left to go." He walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a sheet of paper. "Do you know what this is?" Maria glanced down, her stomach twisted. A performance evaluation. The kind of document that could quietly, officially end her job. Richard placed it gently on the desk. He didn't say fired. He didn't need to. It hung there like a knife in the air. "Anything you want to say?" "Before I sign this," Maria didn't answer. But beneath the desk, her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. "No," Richard raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Then you're free to go." Maria stood, walked to the door, but as it clicked shut behind her, her head spun. She knew Richard had no evidence, but he was beginning to play a different game now, the pressure game. And she also knew this. If she stayed silent any longer, Naomi would be next, and Richard wouldn't hesitate. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. A text from Naomi. "Are you okay? If you need to talk, I'm here." Maria stared at the screen. There was no time left to hesitate. That night, Maria sat alone in her tiny apartment downtown. The room was quiet. A single overhead bulb cast a weak yellow glow on the worn floorboards. Her laptop was open. On the screen, hundreds of internal emails, training documents, meeting notes, each one a small puzzle piece in a picture of injustice that had been building for years. On the table, her phone sat face up. The name on the screen, Naomi Caldwell. The last message still there. Unread, unanswered. "If you need to talk, I'm here." Maria let out a long breath. She wasn't afraid anymore, just tired. And for the first time, she realized she couldn't stay silent. Not this time. She opened a private folder on her laptop, the one where she had quietly stored the things no one dared speak aloud, internal documents that were never meant to be shared. Old emails from Richard using phrases like customer filtering and prioritized communication efficiency. Classification charts breaking customers down by body language, walking posture, and trustworthy appearance. Maria gathered them all, compressed them into a single file. She named it simply Truth. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a new email. To Naomi Caldwell. Subject, "I'm ready." The message read, "Naomi, this is everything I can give you. I know that by sending this, I might lose my job. I know it might mean no one in this industry will hire me again. But what I fear more is staying quiet, pretending nothing is wrong, pretending it's all okay. I don't want to be the silent one ever again. I trust you'll know how to use this to do what's right." Maria. She hit send, and everything changed. The next morning in New York, Naomi stood inside Caldwell Motors headquarters, preparing for the most important board meeting of her life. Her phone buzzed. A single notification appeared on her screen. Attachment Truth. Zip. She opened the file, and with just the first few emails, her expression changed. Standing beside her, Daniel leaned in. "What is it?" Naomi didn't take her eyes off the screen. Her voice dropped low. "Steady proof, irrefutable." And from the inside, Daniel nodded slowly. Maria Naomi allowed herself the smallest smile. She's not staying silent anymore. She forwarded the file to legal and public relations, then sat down at her desk. This time, the email wasn't for one person. It was addressed to every member of the board. Subject: internal confirmation of discriminatory practices. Attached evidence. Dear board members, I no longer bring you only my personal experience. I now bring evidence, and I bring a voice from within, someone willing to speak, even when silence would have been safer. If we continue to do nothing, Caldwell Motors will no longer be a company that made a mistake. We will become a company that knew and chose to protect the mistake. I am formally requesting a vote on how we will address the situation at our Beverly Hills showroom within the next 48 hours. Attached verified documentation from internal sources. Naomi Caldwell. This battle was no longer taking place on the showroom floor. It had walked straight into the highest room of power, the boardroom. And this time, Naomi Caldwell wasn't fighting alone. The 52nd floor executive conference room at Caldwell Motors HQ had never been this silent. 15 board members, people who governed billions each quarter, sat in a long row, faces tight with anticipation. At the center of the room, a large screen displayed a still frame, confidential, internal investigation materials. Naomi Caldwell sat at the head of the table, her back straight, her face calm, her presence unshakable. At her side, Daniel Harper and a corporate attorney. Down the table, Richard Langford sat with his fingers tightly interlocked, trying to appear composed, but the dry press of his lips gave him away. Jonathan Fields, a senior board member, broke the silence. "Thank you all for coming promptly. We have an urgent matter to address." He turned toward Naomi. "Ms. Caldwell, the floor is yours." Naomi nodded once, then pressed the button on the remote in her hand. The screen flickered to life, and one by one, the evidence played. First clip: Naomi being denied access to the Bugatti Chiron. Polite smile. Thinly veiled rejection. "Do you have an appointment?" Second clip: Michael Reeves greeted with warmth and reverence. "Mr. Reeves, an honor to have you. The Chiron is ready, please. Allow me to personally escort you." Then the emails, leaked by Maria, one from Richard Langford, reading, "Prioritize customers with clear financial indicators. Avoid wasting time on those who don't align with the brand image." Then came the document. An unofficial training file titled "Customer Profiling Through Observation. Save Time. Increase Close Rate." The room froze. Not a word, not a shift in posture, not a single excuse. Because there was nothing left to deny. Naomi stood still, then slowly looked around the room, her voice calm, but resolute. "I'm not presenting this to shame anyone. I'm presenting it because if we don't stop this now, Caldwell Motors won't be a symbol of prestige. It'll become a symbol of quiet, coded discrimination." She paused. "And if any of you believe the public won't find out, I'm afraid we're already too late." At the far end of the table, Claire Danvers, head of communications, raised her hand. "The story is already leaking. Media outlets are picking up whispers of a cultural crisis inside Caldwell Motors." Jonathan nodded slowly. "The question now is, what do we do about it?" Richard stood up, straightened his jacket, and began to speak, trying to maintain the tone of control. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're blowing a few operational missteps out of proportion. I'm not denying there were lapses, but I firmly state this was not policy, and it does not represent the way I lead." Naomi tilted her head slightly, voice steady, eyes locked on him. "Then, what would you call these documents, these emails sent by you, these customer rating charts based on walking posture?" Richard hesitated. The air shifted. They were internal tools for staff discretion, not mandatory. Before he could continue, another voice cut in. Evelyn Moore, a board member representing key strategic shareholders. "Richard, what troubles me isn't the mistake. It's the persistence. You knew there was a problem, and you chose to continue." Jonathan raised a hand, calm but final. "We'll move to a closed vote. Inside the very room where billion-dollar decisions are made in minutes, what hung in the balance now was the future of one man and the integrity of an entire brand." Naomi didn't blink. She didn't tremble. She didn't hope. She didn't fear. She simply waited. Jonathan Fields rose to his feet. His voice rang out slow, unwavering, as if each word had been forged in steel. "We will proceed with a closed vote. The sole question before us is this: is Richard Langford still fit to represent Caldwell?" Motors ballots were passed down the line. One by one, board members marked their choices. There were glances, some hesitant, some heavy with years of quiet complicity. And one by one, they stepped out of the shadows. Less than 10 minutes later, the results appeared on the screen. 11 votes in favor of termination, 4 against. Silence. The kind that pulls all the air out of a room. Richard Langford sat completely still. The same hands that once slammed desks with authority now clung to the arms of his chair, white-knuckled and still. Jonathan didn't soften his voice. "Richard, by formal decision of the Caldwell Motors Board of Directors, you are hereby relieved of your position as Executive Director of the Beverly Hills Showroom, effective immediately." Naomi said nothing. She simply looked at Richard, not to humiliate him, but to end it. Richard shot up from his seat, his voice rising with desperation. "You think you're going to save this company? She wants to change everything. Fine, but our customers, they want privilege, not equality." Before anyone could respond, Evelyn Moore spoke, her tone calm, but cutting. "And that's exactly why you no longer belong in the future we're building." 2 security staff entered the room, quiet, firm. Richard looked around as if expecting someone to defend him. No one moved. Naomi didn't flinch. As he passed her, his eyes burning with resentment, She said one final line, soft but unshakable. "We didn't build this brand to protect prejudice. We built it to dismantle it." The boardroom door closed behind Richard this time, for good. Silence hung in the air, heavy, still. Then Jonathan turned toward Naomi. He nodded. "You've saved this brand, but you've also placed it on the edge of a new challenge." Naomi didn't hesitate. "And I will take full responsibility," Naomi said. "Not just to clean up the consequences, but to change the culture that allowed this to exist in the first place." 2 days later, the media flooded into the main auditorium of Caldwell Motors. Cameras flashed, boom mics pointed forward like arrows. All eyes were fixed on the stage, waiting for Naomi Caldwell. This wasn't a crisis control press conference. It was a declaration, a direction, and as Naomi had named it, a public commitment to justice. When Naomi stepped onto the stage, the entire room held its breath. She didn't wear a designer power suit, no $1 million watch, no gold-accented title badge, just a plain white shirt, the same kind she wore on the first day she stood inside Caldwell's first factory. She stood in stillness for a moment, then spoke, her voice low, clear, unwavering. "I stand here today, not just as the CEO, but as someone who was once dismissed in the very company I founded. And if it could happen to me, then it has absolutely happened to others." The cameras clicked wildly. Pens scratched furiously across notepads. Voices whispered, but no one interrupted. Because no one could look away, Naomi raised her hand and flipped open the first page of the folder in front of her. "Starting today, Caldwell Motors will implement the following changes." She spoke each point clearly, not as a gesture, but as a commitment. "We will retrain every employee nationwide with a focus on bias recognition, fair service practices, and a customer-first mindset that values people over profit. We will launch an independent oversight unit with a fully anonymous reporting line. Every act of discrimination will be investigated transparently. We will rebuild our service standards from the ground up. All unspoken appearance-based assessments will be eliminated. No more judgment based on accents, attire, or perceived social class. We will restructure leadership at any showroom with a high complaint ratio and elevate employees who demonstrate fairness, empathy, and integrity. And finally, we will create an employee-led innovation council open to all staff, regardless of rank. Because change should come from the inside, not the top down. Naomi paused, then slowly scanned the room, meeting the eyes of every journalist, every camera, every person watching. Caldwell Motors will no longer be a place that just sells luxury cars. It will be a place where every customer feels seen, heard, and valued. At first, the applause was soft. Then it grew. Stronger, louder, a rising wave, not for a CEO, but for the idea that a company could choose to be better. As Naomi stepped down from the podium, the first person waiting for her was Maria Torres, now wearing a new name badge, Training and Equity Supervisor, Caldwell HQ. Maria's voice was steady, her eyes unwavering. "I'm ready." Naomi nodded, smiling with quiet pride. "We're not just going to change this company. We're going to change the way this entire industry sees people. Outside, former customers, once angry, now hopeful, were beginning to return. Inside, hundreds of employees sent messages of gratitude, because finally they could show up as their whole selves. And across the industry, competitor brands began asking hard questions about their own hidden processes. Naomi stood by the window, watching the city hum with its usual noise and movement. But something inside her had shifted, quietly, permanently. Not everyone is given the chance to change a system, but if you are, don't use it to punish. Use it to rebuild fairness. Naomi Caldwell didn't win because she held power. She won because she refused to treat silence as safety. This story isn't just about a showroom, and it's not just about a woman being denied a test drive. It's about what happens when someone dares to answer injustice, not with rage, but with resolve. This story isn't just about a showroom. It's about every small moment in life where someone is judged for how they look, not for who they are. It's about the glances that look through people instead of truly seeing them. And it's about the people who choose to say enough even when they know there's a price to pay. Maria Torres once believed she was too small to change anything, but her courage sparked the greatest shift in Caldwell Motors history. She didn't have to shout, she didn't have to walk away. She just refused to turn her back one more time. Because sometimes, you don't need a title to do what's right. You just need the courage not to nod when your heart is shaking its head. If you've ever felt unseen, ever been dismissed just because you were different, remember this. You deserve to be acknowledged, not because you look like someone else, but because you are a human being. If this story touched you, share it, not for views, but so that someone out there quietly enduring the weight of being invisible might have one more reason to believe they are not alone. And justice still has a place if someone is brave enough to hold it steady.